Hello, I'm Rob Satloff. I'm the executive director of the Washington Institute, and I am very happy to welcome you to this special event. Um, this is an event that marks the 15th anniversary of the passing of a dear friend, one of the intellectual founders of the Washington Institute, Zeev Schiff. Zeev was an Israeli military commentator, strategist, thinker, writer, who was a dear personal friend to many of us here at the Institute and a valued resource to many here in Washington for his insight and brilliance, not just on Israeli military issues, but Middle East politics more generally. And for many years, we hosted an anniversary event, what's called a Yortzeit event, to remember Zeev by hosting key figures from the Israeli military and national security establishment. This year, after a number of years of not holding the event due to the pandemic, we are back, and we have decided to bring together four very close friends, colleagues, sources, if you will, of Zeev, to look at Israeli national security today. But first, a few words about Zeev. Um, Zeev Schiff, born in France, 1932, moved with his family to Palestine in 1935, where he spent the rest of his life. Zeev was a journalist. He joined Haaretz, and he spent a career with Haaretz, Israel's leading newspaper, at least at that time. He defined what it meant to be a defense commentator and a defense correspondent in a country in which these are the most important issues, the life and death issues. Throughout, he always sought the right balance between the twin demands, the twin pulls of professional honesty and loyal patriotism, two ideals that he found a way to merge throughout his career. Because of that, Zeev was a great keeper of secrets, confidant to military and political leaders for decades, but never too reluctant to call out errors, missteps, incompetence, or wrongdoing. Be honest and keep them honest. For Zeev, those were two sides of the same coin. As I said a moment ago, Zeev was instrumental in the founding growth and development of this organization, the Washington Institute, to be an independent voice in assessing Middle East politics and advising the US government. His was consistently a voice of reason, moderation, and sanity. I think it's fair to say that Zeev was a hawkish dove who strove for peace, recognizing that war and bloodshed was often a regrettable reality along the way. Even 15 years after his passing, I know I speak for longtime members of the Institute, trustees, fellows, and staff, in saying that we still miss Zeev for many reasons. Of course, our loss is nothing compared to the loss of his wife, Sarah, his children, Eyal and Hadar, and his grandchildren. But we miss Zeev as a journalist in an increasingly tabloid-like profession. We miss Zeev as a voice of moderation in a politics increasingly polarized and pugilistic. And we miss Zeev as a source of wise counsel at a time when so many are offering free advice that isn't worth what we're not paying for it. As Israel approaches its fifth election in less than 4 years, facing a reality marked by the hope of peace with so many across the Arab world, the specter of an Iranian nuclear program galloping ahead with no stop in sight, and a relationship with Palestinians that is essentially what it was when Zeev passed away. I know Zeev's one-word response would be unbelievable. To help make sense of that reality, we've brought together four of Zeev's close friends, professional colleagues, and as I said, sometimes unnamed sources. Together, they have more than 150 years, 150 years of experience as actors in or commentators on Israeli national security. They are in alphabetical order, and I won't go through their bios that have been on our invitation. They are retired General Amos Gilead, former minister and retired General Ephraim Sneh, the Institute's Lafer International Fellow and co-author with Zeev of so many works, Ehud Yaari, and retired General Amos Yadlin. I've asked each of them to very briefly summarize their view of the most serious strategic challenge facing Israel today and what they hope Israel, alone or in partnership with others, should do about it. And then after opening remarks, we will have a conversation. So with that, Amos Gilead, the floor is yours. Amos, you have to turn on your microphone. You're on mute. You're still on mute. There you go. Go ahead.
I'm missing. I'm thinking of Zeev Schiff frequently. Really, I miss him. I haven't met somebody like him. And my prediction that I will never meet somebody like him. Combination of rare qualities. You have concluded it in such beautiful way, but I need to share with you. Really, I'm thinking of him frequently. The main challenges are well known to everybody here that are veterans of so many failures to deal with our problems, or the problems in the Middle East. I would like to divide it to good news and bad news. Let's begin with good news, because when I used to be IDF spokesperson, there was newspapers that was called Good News. It collapsed after 3 weeks. The good news, the main good news, that we do have unbelievable alliance with the Arab countries, leading Arab countries. That's unbelievable and amazing. I do think the importance of the United States here is uniquely significant. Maybe others think differently. And because the fact, for example, that we are part of CENTCOM could be only dream or fantasy in the past. It gives so many advantages besides our unique alliance with the United States that there is no alternative to it. The United States is a major pillar in our national security, but also the alliance with the Arab countries give Israel many advantages. Of course, I don't think they will ever fight with Israel physically against Iran. Maybe others think the opposite. But it gives Israel many advantages. 2 advantages, for example, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan gives Israel strategic depth until Iraq. It's so important for offensive perspective, defense perspective, and other perspectives. Egypt, the leader of the Middle East, in my opinion, who could imagine when I've dealt with Egypt, it was so difficult, and now it's much better, the relationship mainly between the IDF and their colleagues in Egypt. And Abraham Accords give Israel many advantages. I don't need to elaborate. And the horizon looks quite bright. That's one. The second good news that we do have United States, the alliance with the United States. There are many talks, we don't need them. Again, it's so stupid. We cannot do, even we are powerful, and we are powerful. One of the main reasons is because of the United States support. But for example, vis-a-vis Iran, without strategic coordination, cooperation with the United States, physically, technically, we can attack them, but that's hypothetical. The third issue is, for the time being, we are defeating the terror in very impressive way. But that relates also to bad news, because it relies only on our capabilities, intelligence, unbelievable intel capabilities combined with operational capabilities. That's why we are not suffering from terror in the streets of Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. There are hundreds of efforts to carry out spectacular acts of terror, and most of them fail because of our unique capabilities. That's some of our good news. Bad news. Based on some failure in the strategic arena in Israel, I think, canceling the agreement between US and Iran in 2015 without real alternatives, including military ones, we are dependent on Iran's will whether to proceed to military nuclear option or not. That's unbelievable because we have predicted the Iranian threat long time ago, decades ago, and how we got here. If we want to be powerful vis-a-vis Iran, we need to be powerful militarily, but we need to be smart. The combination between wisdom and military power, that makes a difference. Now today, based on this failure in convincing or contributing to convince United States to cancel the agreement, we are paying very expensive price. I don't know, I'm not sure there will be agreement. If there agreement, how it will look like. Anyway, we need to be coordinated with the United States. We need to be coordinated with the international community, and we must not be alone like Iran is today. That's one. About Ukraine, I'm taking very seriously the threats of President Putin to use a nuclear weapon. It depends on the deterrence that will come from the United States, because according to the national security doctrine of Russia, they are entitled to defend, even with nuclear, Russian territories. And very soon, 20% of Ukraine will be part of Russia. If there is, and I hope not, usage of nuclear weapon in Ukraine, it will open the head. It's very relevant to Iran and very relevant to the future of, gloomy future of the Middle East as a nuclear race or whatever. If there is nuclear weapon in Middle East besides its existential threat, we will look much weaker if Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey will follow Iran. About Palestinians, the good news I've mentioned. The bad news is we don't have political plan what to do with them. First time our prime minister is declaring something about the two-state solution. I'm not sure it's political issue or not, but mainly the decline of the Palestinian Authority is disastrous to Israel. We don't have alternative to the Palestinian Authority under the leadership of Abu Mazen. Abu Mazen, unlike Arafat, as I'm considering him as a partner here, beside friend, Arafat was bloody terrorist, mega terrorist. The whole Oslo process with him was total fiasco. That's my opinion since I was in service. Abu Mazen, he is the opposite. Maybe he is not, according to my humble assessment, he's not Zionist. And according to my assessment, he will never be. However, he is against terror. He's coordinating with us. And his apparatus coordinating with the IDF, civil administration, coordinator of the territories, Shabak, ISA, and everybody. This coordination used to save Israel from huge troubles. For example, even the small ones. If somebody, Israelis, there are many stupid of them, entered the Tulkarm and they were caught by the Palestinians, they tried to murder them. Who saved them? Who prevented crisis? This coordination. Now, the more we need to enter and to take care of the terror, less effective the Palestinian Authority will be. Besides internal problems, and I'm against describing Abu Mazen as terrorist, not because I like him, because it's not true, and I'm against lies. He is anti-terror, he is against terror, And without the Palestinian Authority, we will find ourselves more and more in the West Bank. And my nightmare is that we will become one state for two nations. And the Palestinians are falling in love with this idea more and more, and Israelis don't understand it. It's not included in the dialogue vis-a-vis the coming election. It's like marginal issue, and one day demography will become very significant. That's my nightmare. Today, the Arabs don't care because of their own problems. One day, it will be different. So these are the main bad news. I do have others, but I leave to my colleagues and my friends to continue. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Amos. And you kept within your time, which is terrific, outlining both good news and bad news. All right, we're going to turn now to former minister and retired general Ephraim Sneh. Ephraim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this meeting session, which is dedicated to the memory of my, I may say, beloved elder brother, Zeev Schiff. Not surprisingly, our strategic problems are divided to two titles, Iran and Palestinians. And what recently happened is that the conventional threats of Iran, non-nuclear threats of Iran, become more immediate and more dangerous to Israel, mainly more immediate than the nuclear threat, which is maybe around the corner, but it's not yet here. The reason is that Iran succeeded to take over through militias Lebanon, parts of Syria, Yemen, and deeper in the region in Iraq. And the potential of these militias is to launch unmanned vehicles, armed unmanned vehicles, rockets, missiles, Israel in a way which covers most, if not all of its territory. For instance, people forget that the distance, the range between Yemen and the international airport of Abu Dhabi, that was already attacked by the pro-Iranian militia, is the same distance as Eilat. The north of Israel is covered by many thousands of missiles that are now under the process of upgrading to precise guided missiles. So we face a reality that Israel cannot accept and cannot acquiesce because it is incompatible with our sovereign life in this country. Maybe sooner than later, Israel has to take an action. To take an action, it means military confrontation. No other way. And most of the Israelis are not aware of it, and nobody tells them it is going to happen. Meaning of this reality. Now, there is the American dimension of this problem. It has nothing to do with the attitude and the sympathy and the solidarity of various American administrations to Israel. But the priorities are different. The rate of urgency is different. And the timetable is different. The American timetable, the American time dimension of the Iran problem is different than ours. As a superpower, the United States gives most of its attention to the issue of nuclear weapon. And I believe that when the president says, I will not allow it to happen, he will do his utmost. But we are, as I said, we are concerned now about non-nuclear threats, which are more immediate and very serious, and I am not sure that we enjoy full or even partial US cooperation when we have to tackle with this threat. It's quite obvious that because of its own reason that we have to respect it. The United States is confrontation averse. The point is that the Arabs feel that the United States tried to avoid as much as possible any confrontation with the Iranians. And the outcome is that they are not saying, okay, the United States, maybe we cannot rely on, let's hug the Israelis and work together with them. No. Amos Yadlin is here. We attended, both of us attended a meeting of regional, mainly Gulf countries. There was US presence there, Barrett McGurk and others. And we share the same feeling. They do not rely on America. And the result is not as we accept that they will come to us. Let's create a regional front to thwart the Iranian threat. No, they are going silently to Tehran and try to, I can't say reconcile, but mend fences, become more friendly, reduce tensions. They are not with us. It should be very clear. In the conflict with Iran, Israel is alone. This is, if we speak about problems, this is a problem. Now, the second issue is the Palestinian issue. And the danger, if we are speaking about strategic dangers, is the danger of ethnic confrontation, not only in the West Bank, but in the entire territory of Israel, namely the mixed Israeli-Arab towns, the Negev in the south. And the background to this threat is the demographic reality of 50-50. We, the Jews, are now less than 50% of the population between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. 15 million people are living there. Less than half of them are Jewish. And this is if you take this figure plus the process of building more and more illegal settlements, and they call it agriculture farms, it creates a situation of one mixed state. There are more than 200 outpost farms in the West Bank, which are not legal, but settlers using them as a base for expansion of land, activities against Palestinians. We have all the ingredients of an imminent civil war, which will not remain in the boundaries of the West Bank. Nobody's speaking about it. Now, the detonator, or the most immediate detonator, is a Temple Mount in Jerusalem. There is no serious effort to defuse the bomb. And nothing is more sensitive in the Muslim world as the Temple Mount. And we are now couple of weeks before the Jewish high holidays. One provocator, and I will not mention names, but you all know that, will go to the mountain and will create their provocations, can ignite a huge flame over the region, not only in Jerusalem. Again, the United States avoid too much intervention in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, let alone taking the initiative to bring about a renewed dialogue, let alone negotiation. Low priority No one wants to invest energy. What is required, the minimum requirement is done, no more than that. So we are sliding to a conflict of a different nature, more devastating. And in this very moment, there is no one single political force who's doing something to prevent it. So this is the reality that we are facing. And again, we shall miss the wisdom and the experience of our friend Wolf. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ephraim. Excellent. We're now going to turn to longtime Washington Institute associate and co-author with Zeev of so many of these works that that are on the cover of this memorial volume for Zeev. Ehud Yaari. Ehud, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everybody. Zeev was my older brother, close partner, and guide at times of trouble. I miss our daily conversations, sometimes more than once a day. But like Amos Gilead, I'm thinking a lot about him and what he would say today. I will try to make few remarks that I think are in line with the approach we had developed over the years of working together. I hope so. The main challenge that Israel faces is in the danger of the Iranian pursuit, in my opinion, of predominance in the Fertile Crescent, bolstered by their rapid nuclear drive, merging, incorporating, and taking the lead over the of the ongoing Palestinian struggle against us. A combination that will expand the ring of missiles and drones the IRGC is striving to establish around Israel into the Gaza Strip, and even more important, the West Bank. As I see it, this is the true gist of the Qasem Soleimani plan and legacy. Some signs: Hamas is returning to Damascus amid fierce debate amongst its own leaders. Weapons are being smuggled through the Syrian-Jordanian border and across the Jordan River into the West Bank. What is called for? In brief, one, I've been saying it for a decade and more, a much more proactive attitude concerning Iran and Hezbollah's slow entrenchment in Syria. Direct pressure on Assad to make his regime realize the price, assisting quietly the vast array of anti-regime groups in the three southern governorates of Syria, Sweda, Daraa, Kneitra, without boots on the ground. There are a lot of opportunities there, and unfortunately, in my opinion, Israel proved too cautious between March 2011, when the Syrian uprising started, and the arrival of the Russians in September 15. We need, of course, to consult and coordinate with the United States on this, but we cannot lie to ourselves. Israel is a loser in the Syrian civil war. Bibi Netanyahu didn't like me saying it was a strategic defeat in Israel, so I will say it was and is a strategic failure. Second, Israel cannot influence the battle for Iraq, which, the way I see it, is the single most crucial area which will shape the course of future events in the entire Fertile Crescent. But more should and can be done to disrupt the land corridors the IRGC is engaged in constructing, linking Iran to the Mediterranean and the Golan Heights, mainly the Al Bukamal, Al Qaim area on the border, and among the Sunni tribes of the Anbar, the western province of Iraq, Sunnis. Number three, I'll say it briefly, but it's a very complicated subject. Israel has to decide for itself. No declarations. What is the red line in Lebanon? How many precise missiles we can afford to let Nasrallah acquire? I'm not sure they are going just to rust. 4, Israel must enlist support for Jordan as Shiite militias in both Iraq and Syria move into position on its borders. I think not enough is being done to support Jordan. Not enough is being done to mend fences between Israel and the Jordan, referring to the king's latest speech. But as Amos Gilead was saying, of course, correctly, Jordan is so important that it requires more investment. 4, this is the touchy subject to which the Prime Minister was alluding now in a not too bad speech at the General Assembly of the UN. A major shift is required at the Palestinian front. Admittedly, an end of conflict, end of claims deal is not realistic now, unfortunately. Yet, stabilization of the situation and economic boost are possible. I believe that with urging by the US and the other donor states, Norway, Europeans, Japan, etc., President Abbas, Abu Mazen, can be encouraged, or if you prefer the term compelled, like Arafat was when he was forced to nominate Abbas as prime minister, he can be encouraged or compelled to appoint a new government in the Palestinian Authority, which is dedicated to state building, investments, upgrading of the infrastructure, and improving services, instead of the current government, which is all about slogans and an ever-expanding public sector, wasting the donors' money, and in a way ours. Also, which I believe is extremely important, an arrangement is possible. I hear it. I'm talking to the people. An arrangement is possible to settle the file of the gunmen on the wanted list in the West Bank. Dozens, not hundreds, not thousands. We have done it before in July 2009, and it has reduced dramatically the scale of violence and terrorist activity. We should go back to this type of arrangement in order to prevent further deterioration of the situation in the West Bank. This week, we have 1 or 2 firearm attacks a day, a night, unprecedented in many ways. It cannot go on because it will force the IDF to do much more than they would like to do or they are doing now. Final word, we can talk about a lot of other subjects. I have a strong impression that we are witnessing a quiet, often undetected, growing rivalry and tension between Turkey and Iran all over the region. President Erdogan will not be in that huge palace of his forever. A bigger Turkish role, I believe, should be welcomed, especially through a rapprochement with the Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, etc., and of course, Israel. The region looks differently. When Turks, the main Arab states, and Israel are sort of huddled together. I'm not speaking about military alliances. Amos said what needs to be said about CENTCOM, which is a good umbrella. But when Turks, Arabs, and Israelis are sort of huddled together, it is pushing Iran into a different corner. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ehud. And now our fourth speaker, retired General Amos Yadlin. Amos, thank you I know you just got off a plane. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon in DC, and good evening to my colleagues in Israel. Yes, Zeev was for 50 years the leading and the best military analyst in Israel. I was not working with him like Ehud, but he was always somebody to look at, to read in the morning, to know that he was a rare combination of a professional, of a journalist with ethics of a journalist, and with a lot of patriotism and responsibility, and he knew how to find the right mix of all these demands that sometimes have some tension between. He passed away in 2007 in the summer. We were in the midst of preparing our operation to terminate another nuclear program in the Middle East. Preparing myself to this evening, I read his last 20 columns in Haaretz, and he was very worried from Israel deterrence after the Second Lebanese War, about what's happening in the Gaza Strip. And I wish he would have lived another years to see the IDF and the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli intelligence destroying the Syrian nuclear reactor and bringing back the deterrence that he was so worried about. Listening to the previous speaker, I thought that maybe I would ask to move to Tehran, to Damascus, to Beirut, to Sana'a, to Baghdad, because it seems like they are the rising force and Israel is under attack. So let me share with you my view. Jerusalem and Tel Aviv is better. The IDF is the strongest military power in the Middle East, and all the other players are deterred and taking Israel very seriously. It's not Israeli air defense batteries that are attacked every week in Syria. It's not Israeli scientists that are killed somewhere in Iran, according to the international media. And Israel has a very efficient military powers that all these enemies, yes, they want to destroy us. Yes, they want us to be in the Mediterranean. Yes, they want to help the Palestinians. But at the end of the day, they are defeated almost every day and every night. So just to put it in perspective, you ask us what is the most significant strategic challenge. And I will speak about the Iranian strategic challenge because according to my judgment, there is no existential threat facing Israel these days. It was not the case in 48, it was not the case in 67 or 73. There is no military powers that can cope with Israel today. There is potential existential threat, and this is Iran nuclear weapon. And this is the significant and the main strategic challenge. By the way, on the non-conventional, and Qasem Soleimani was mentioned, I was very happy to see him, his picture now burned in the street of Iran lately, when the president put him Bibi style in the UN General Assembly, but the people of Iran burned his placards in the street. And if Qasem Soleimani is sitting somewhere in hell and looking down, what happened to his plan from 2016? How to do what Ehud and Ephraim described so professionally. Yes, he wanted to have another Hezbollah in the Golan Heights. Hezbollah is not in the Golan Heights. It was defeated on the Golan Heights. He wanted to have Syria with a lot of Shia militia and missiles and UAV. He has like 10% of what he planned for 2021. On Hezbollah, he is a little bit more successful, and this is a challenge. But once again, Nasrallah in a way became an Israeli asset. You remember very well 2006, and for the last 15 years, yes, he's building a military force, but the other side is also building something. So I will go to the nuclear issue because this is the main issue. As my friend Amos Gilead said, the US withdrew from the deal in 2018, and both Netanyahu and Trump haven't prepared a plan B to the case that the Iranians are not stupid. And let me tell you, they are not stupid. And they withdraw from the deal as well. They are even smarter. They haven't withdrawn from the deal because the deal is good for them at the end of the sunset years. But they breached it. So now Israel has two alternatives, and both of them are not good. Both of them are grave alternatives. Going back to the deal, which is a bad deal, and it's become worse as time passes. We are not 15 years from the sunset. We are only 8 years from the sunset, and some restriction will expire even earlier. The Iranians have a better centrifuges, so the breakout time is not a year, it's half a year. And Iran will get a lot of money to continue with all their millennium activities that was described here so vividly. So going back to the deal, bad idea. Not going back to the deal, also a bad idea, because Iran is now closer to the bomb as it was never so close to the threshold. 2 weeks, 2 months, depends on what you want to prove, but it's really close. So what should we do? I think the problem is not going back to the deal or not going back to the deal. The problem is what are you doing in any case 1 minute after? You go back to the deal or you are not going back to the deal. And what you have to be in your disposal is a reliable, credible military option. And not only in Israel, in the US as well, because if I'm the military advisor of the supreme leader and he's still listening, I will tell him the Americans has the capacities, they don't have the will, the Israelis don't have an update capacity, but they may have the will, but basically it's an empty group. We are safe. So the US has to deal with the credibility of their military capabilities, and we have to update our military option. But this is not enough. We have to look for a better deal by forcing the Iranians to be there. What the Iranians have done in the last almost 2 years, they smell the eagerness of the US to go back to the deal. And basically, as it seems like the negotiator from your side haven't taken negotiation 101 and saying that they want to go back to the deal almost in any price. Longer and stronger. That was the main, not the main, but it was something that was invented not in Jerusalem. It was invented in the confirmation of Secretary Blinken on the Hill. Somehow Israel was unable to convince during the Bennett time that this is a goal, that the two countries should go together to achieve. Because the Bennett government very much didn't want to speak on any deal, because it's legitimized a deal. There is a change under Lapid. He is now speaking about that Israel is not against any deal, but Israel is against a bad deal and they want a better deal. So what should we do with the US? And you ask this question, Rob, as well. I'm coming back to my 2015 recommendation. The President of the United States, whoever he is, Obama, Trump, Biden, declared that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, will never have a nuclear weapon. And Israel are sharing the same objective. But somehow we haven't prepared a plan how to stop that. Strategic plan, operational plan, credible plan. We are talking to each other very politely lately, but there is no plan. And this is what I recommend Prime Minister Lapid and Bennett before. Go to the President of the United States, and after being in the Oval Office, speaking about that Iran will not, sharing the same objective, that Iran will never be nuclear, then send your people not to talk and to exchange analysis. Make a plan, strategic plan, operational plan. And this should be, I think, what we have to do if we go back to the deal and if we don't go back to the deal. Last two remarks, both on Iran. There are demonstrations in Iran today. 31 people were killed. 80 cities, you see the people in the street. We never know whether the social networks give us a biased picture, but we have to try and help these people as much as we can and not repeat the 2009 mistake. Last but not least, remember, and it seems like sometimes people forget it in this, Iran is part of the undemocratic, authoritarian, and now even aggressive camp of Putin and Xi. And Iran belongs to the bad guys. And this should be the base, the fundamental approach to Iran, and not the ones that look to make business with this country. Thank you.
Very good. Amos, thank you. Thank you to all four of you for very provocative remarks. I'm sure Zeev would have been proud to know the level of exchange that we're having right now. At the moment, I want to bring in another participant. I've asked Martin Indyk, my predecessor, the founding director of the Washington Institute and a lifelong friend of Zeev, to join the conversation. Martin, you have a question for this group.
I sure do. Thank you, Rob. And Zeev was not my older brother. He was all of yours older brother, but he was my uncle. And he was my very wise uncle. And certainly in the establishment of the Washington Institute and in its formative years, Zeev was critical for his wise advice that all of you have attested to in your different ways. for bringing us Ehud Yaari, and for doing something else that isn't always remembered. And that is that Zeev wrote for the Washington Institute. And he wrote one of our first policy papers. And that was critically important to the credibility of the Washington Institute. There was blood on the floor, so to speak, over the publication of it, because Zeev, in his clear-eyed way, argued that Israel had to find a way to talk to the PLO. And the board, in its wisdom, understood the importance of the independence and credibility of the Institute, and as much as they hated it, did not try in any way to block the publication of this paper, which at the time was profoundly controversial. But that was part of Zeev's way of looking in a cold-eyed, realistic, sophisticated way at the world. And that was his great value added, not just as a friend, but as an analyst, that he could see things as they were and speak truthfully as he saw about them. So it's in that context that I have my question. And it's a provocative one, and I think Zeev, I can always claim that Zeev would have agreed with me, since we can't, unfortunately, ask him, but that's what I'm going to do. It's a question from Zeev, which is to say that since you have all made it clear that the existential threat to Israel remains Iran, and particularly an Iran with nuclear capabilities, why is it that Israel actually hasn't taken military action? After all, you did in the case of Iraq, as Amos knows well, you did in the case of Syria. If one sat back and looked at the notion that another state in the region hostile to Israel could actually be 2 weeks from the nuclear threshold, it would be inconceivable, I think, to Zeev that Israel hadn't taken military action already. And it's so, therefore, it leads to the question beyond all of the talk about the military option, why doesn't the military option ever get used? And is it possible that the answer to the question to bomb Iran or to live with an Iranian bomb is in fact to live with an Iranian bomb? And is that possible for Israel? Because if it's not, it sure doesn't look that way.
Okay, provocative question. Thank you, Martin. I appreciate that. Thank you for posing it to our guests. Who wants to tackle it first? Amos, since you were involved in the 2 previous counter-proliferation efforts of Israel, why not the 3rd?
Yeah, it is not the same case. The Iraqi and the Syrian case were much more, let's say, easier, because it was one target, a nuclear reactor. It was relatively close. Iraq, not so much, but Syria, no problem. And both of them were caught in surprise. When somebody picked the phone or knocked on the door to Saddam Hussein and to Assad, 81 and 2007, respectively, they were totally surprised that their prestigious, very top secret project somehow was destroyed. The Iranians are far away. The Iranians are much more sophisticated, and they have learned the lesson. They have learned the lesson of Iraq. They have learned the lesson of Syria. They have learned the lesson of Gaddafi, and they are preparing themselves in the last 20 years to this attack. So it's totally different. After saying that, I'm saying that the Israelis are not the same. They have learned something as well. They prepare something, and the idea when to launch it is a huge question. Because Martin, you're absolutely right. The dilemma is between the bomb and the bombing. Whether you live with Iranian bomb or you bomb Iran with all the consequences. Because you will not be surprised, it will lead to a war, maybe not a war, maybe exchange of fire. This is another argument that we should do in another time. What will be exactly the Iranian reaction? But it's a very, very tough dilemma. And I wonder why somebody wants to be the Prime Minister of Israel, because he will have to choose between these two tough, strategic, important, let's say, crucial to the future of Israel and the Jewish people, whether to live with Iran with a bomb or to bomb Iran. We have been in this discussion, 2010, 2012, and there was a minister and prime minister that basically tried to convince everybody that if we have to choose, the bombing is the right alternative. Some other, and most of them were the professionals, but some ministers as well, because Netanyahu is now saying that he didn't have the majority that he wanted, thought that maybe living with nuclear Iran is a less problematic option. By the way, when the protocols will be open, you will see that I was among those who thought that if you are in the junction between the bomb and the bombing, I will go for the bombing. However, I thought that in 2010, we were not in the junction. We have a lot to try, and the military option is the last resort. Have you tried sanctions? Not yet in 2010. Have you tried what I call the strategy C, cyber, covert, clandestine? Have you tried regime change? You haven't tried everything that you have to go to the military option. And by the way, I don't see that any of the people here are with Kippah, but if you ask a researcher of operation researcher, how long can you postpone an attack, a nuclear program after you attack it? I was in the room when Raful explained that it is not 2 years, it is 5 years. And I was in the rooms when people thought that North Korea will send another reactor and within 5 years we'll have another. So let's take the 5 years, which is optimistic. If we would accept the decision in 2010 that to bomb, we already have to bomb another 2 times. So I think that my assessment that we were not in the junction in 2010 was right. When the fork of this crucial decision will be, maybe soon, and then maybe you will see something else that you saw until now.
So let me ask you, is there anybody in this group who believes that if in fact Israel reaches that crucial juncture, having exhausted the other set of options that Amos just referred to, and the ultimate decision is accept the bomb or do the bombing. Is there anybody in this group who thinks that Israel will not do the bombing, but will accept the bomb? Amos Yadlin? Oh, I'm sorry, Amos Gilead, you wanted to say something.
I spoke too much.
Yeah, no, Amos Gilead.
I do think that it's not provocative question, it's a very important one. I do think that it's poor leadership of Netanyahu. I share with you why. If he came to conclusion that he needed to attack with Minister of Defense, prestigious Ehud Barak, he needed to do it. The whole bullshit of 8 members that were against him is baseless because by law, Israeli law, they don't have any meaning in Israel. The only organ that can take decision is a cabinet. And Netanyahu did have, along his service, overwhelming majority in the cabinet or in the government. Now, if he came to conclusion to attack, what he needed to do first to talk with the Americans and not to alienate them. If he came to, and not to humiliate them or to insult the president, that's so silly that March of Evil by late Barbara Tuchman, she could write another chapter. To insult a president of the United States, whoever he is, this is institution. Now, either you wanted to attack, he needed to listen like Begin, listen to head of Mossad, head of Amman, the military intelligence. They recommended him not to do it, and he said, Saddam Hussein, like reflection of Hitler, not in my term. So he ordered to attack. The moment he ordered, Amos Yadlin and his brave colleagues saved us from disaster. Now, if Netanyahu came to this conclusion to attack, he needed to do it after checking the professional opinions. Now, he ordered it.
All right, but you're I just want to interrupt you, Amos, only because we only have a few minutes. I'd rather not relitigate that episode, but let's look to the future.
Because maybe Netanyahu will be our prime minister in next month.
Right.
I'm afraid of him because there is a gap between his image that he creates and what he's doing. Like he enhanced Hamas against his theory to cope with terror. Who is responsible for enhancing Hamas? He is the one who released 1,000 terrorists. Who gave the order that he didn't give the order? Who didn't coordinate with the United States? We cannot attack without strategic coordination. I'm not talking about our technical capabilities. We cannot do it without the United States. So if he came to conclusion, he left the impression that I think, this is my version, maybe I'm wrong, pushed the United States to reach the agreement behind our back, another scandal from Israeli point of view. And that's this agreement that maybe was terrible, but in Middle East, almost you are choosing between the worst and the worst. The worst is to cancel the agreement, and if we are responsible for this mistake, that's unforgivable. Now, if Netanyahu gets tomorrow to the prime minister, he will declare, I will destroy the nuclear project. From my point of view, the Iranians can be sure that they can proceed.
Ehud Yaari, you wanted to come in, and then Ephraim. Yeah, Ehud.
Quickly, I'm the only non-general here except you and Martin. I'm Martin. So I will say the following. One, delivering, in my opinion, as a non-ex-general, delivering a devastating blow to the Iranian nuclear program is not in the cards now. It's in the rhetorics. Number two, I don't know any country that kept busy for 30 years trying to get a bomb and didn't get it, except Iran. Think about it. And number three, I have a strong suspicion for a long time that the Iranians know that if they get a bomb or have a test, then Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Egypt will all go in the same direction. and probably, just an assumption, they want to get just a screwdriver away from assembling a bomb, but not beyond. Thank you.
All right, Ephraim. I mean, your final comment, Ehud, of course, begs the question: isn't that close enough for whatever decision that Amos Yadlin was referring to? Uh-oh, we just lost the screen. All right, we continue. Ephraim Sneh.
Word.
Fine, unmute yourself.
No, he's fine. He's fine.
Oh,
Go ahead, Ephraim.
you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
We mentioned the coin credible deterrence. I would like to raise an idea. Months ago, the Pentagon signed agreement with Boeing for a procurement of 4 tanker aircraft, KC-46, for Israel. The delivery is 2026. What will happen if, in an annex of this agreement, the U.S. Air Force will lend to the Israeli Air Force, if not 2 tankers, in order that our pilots will start to train with them now, not in 2026, 4 years from now, but now, today. Everybody knows what these aircraft are for. What will be the impact on the Iranians if they know that we are training on this mission? How more seriously they will take what we say? One point. Another point is referred to what's going on now in Tehran. Everybody courts the Ayatollahs, European, let alone the Russians and Chinese, and in a way, the US administration. Who speaks to the Iranian people? Who promised them that if we'll be in Iran, a secular democracy, their life will be better? Nobody says it. So, with all the brave sacrifice that we see now in the streets of 80 Iranian cities, I'm afraid that the result will be as in 2009, because the Western democracy don't put themselves in the side of the Iranian people, but competing and courting the Ayatollahs. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Martin, I'm not sure if you got a completely clear answer to all your to your question, but I think we certainly explored the issue. We only have a few minutes left. I know it's shameful that we're touching on the most important issues connected to Israel's national security, and we only have a few minutes left. But I wanted to underscore a fascinating contrast in your opening remarks. A couple of you noted that Israel has 2 urgent existential threats to its survival. One of you quoted as saying, there's no existential threat to Israel's existence, Israel's survival. This is a huge difference. Are we seeing the difference in definition, difference in urgency, difference in timing? Why, for example, do you, Amos Yadlin, not see an existential threat from the demographic factor that both Amos Gilead and Ephraim Sneh underscored? And you, Amos Gilead and Ephraim, if you had only a minute, 2 minutes to talk to your next prime minister and say you have to address one threat, because a country trying to address 2 existential threats may end up addressing neither, but at least address one. Which of these 2 do you think your next prime minister needs to address from the first moment of their prime ministry?
decide who will speak. You are the leader.
Yeah.
Okay, you go first, briefly.
Okay, in 1 minute. I do think the Prime Minister is paid to deal with many issues. He needs to deal with the Palestinian and with Iran. It's two different kinds of policy. And about Iran, relating to what the Prime Minister said, I cannot imagine United States giving us the planes sooner than 2006 because of policy. They don't want us to attack. For having an option of attack, you need coordination and cooperation and dialogue. And Palestinians are very important. That's why I'm applauding Prime Minister Lapid as long as it's not political game in the United Nations. But he needs to tackle two issues. That's my recommendation.
He needs to do both. Okay, Ephraim Sneh, can a Prime Minister prioritize, or does he have to do both?
There is one thing which is imperative, immediate imperative now, is to prevent explosion on the Temple Mount in the high holidays, and to do everything, including with connection to Jordan, to keep the status quo on the Temple Mount as it was. This is one thing. Second, to stop the waste of budgets on the illegal outposts in the West Bank. 210 illegal outposts in the West Bank. This is give the momentum for the one-state situation. At least stop financing them. Second thing, and waive all the restrictions on the budgets for the Palestinian Authority. This is not our money. It's their money, which we take as tax collector. To give them this money, we are not going now to educate them. The money is the salaries of those security people who are, as somebody here, I don't remember who was it, described, that bring back the Israelis who by mistake entering Kalkilia and Tulkarm and cooperate with us in curbing terrorism. And they don't do so because they don't have salaries. And they don't have salaries because we cut the tax reimbursement. And when the former administration of Trump punished the Palestinians by slashing support, the Israeli government applauded. That's what should be done quickly. Immediate support to the authority and stop the provocations among extreme settlers in the West Bank. This is what we can do on our part. What our security service has to do, they are doing without any further recommendation. They already do it. Fortunately, successfully.
Okay, thank you, Ephraim. So Amos Yadlin.
In one word, the most important issue now is to prevent deterioration to an ethnic conflict all over Israel.
Okay.
From the Jiftlik to Ajami in Jaffa.
Given what Ephraim just said, Amos Yadlin, you were pretty categorical earlier, both by not mentioning this issue and then your comment that Israel faces no existential threat. Do you disagree?
No, I think it's two different existential threats. One is a military existential threat that Israel can be destroyed by an army, by a standoff missiles and UAV and whatever destroying military a country. And I say, no, Israel is strong enough to stop all of that. The existential threat with the Palestinians is totally different. It's a political one. It's threatening the dimension and the values of the state of Israel. And I'm not very far away from Amos Gilead or Ephraim Sneh on this issue. But it was you who asked us to speak about one most significant threat. The difference here is that if you want to solve or to ease this existential threat, there is a lot that can be done. You don't need the United States, you don't need refuelers, you don't need Air Force, you don't need anything. You need political determination, a compass, where you want to go. And I want to go to a Jewish, democratic, secure, and with the moral upper hand. This is my vision, and the Temple Mount and Ajami and all these places are tactical. The question is where you want to bring Israel 20, 30 years from now. I'm not in panic once again. Gaza is not in my demographic calculations. Thanks to Sharon, it is not anymore within Israel, internal threat. When people are saying there is a majority of Arabs, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it twice because they are not counting the right numbers. And Gaza, the 2 million is not under our control. So there is a lot that can be done if you want, if you know where you're going. The problem here, unlike Iran, that Israel is all of them, left and right and center, don't want to see nuclear Iran, don't want to see Iran entrenched in Syria. Here it's an internal dispute within Israel. 50% want to have one state, other want at least, if not two states, to separate from the Palestinians. And I think, once again, what the Prime Minister have done in the UN is a huge step forward, because once again, he's speaking about the need to separate from the Palestinians. It is not going to be easy. We don't have a partner. Who is the partner? Hamas? Abu Mazen, the weak, corrupt leader that take us to Hague and pay money to the terrorists? It's not going to be easy. But if you know, and this is what Zionism is all about, that you have a vision and you are making this vision become true by your own actions and deeds. And this is what we're lacking in the last 20 years.
Ehud Yaari, I'm going to give you the last word. Israel is about to have its 5th election in 4 years. Given everything we've just talked about today and the political challenges that you see Israel facing, what would Zeev say about the current political situation in Israel, and what advice would he be offering right now?
He will probably say that we are probably going to a 6th round of elections, the way it shapes now. But 2 comments, if I may. One, I do believe, and again, I'm not an ex-general, I apologize for that. I do believe that the Qasem Soleimani plan, long-term, not tomorrow, presents a serious existential threat to Israel. When he was eliminated next to the airport of Baghdad, I said on television that for me, it was like the assassination of Heydrich, the architect of the final solution for the Nazis. And I think we shouldn't be mistaken about what this plan is and what it can become. And we are, yes, slowing it down, Amos is right, and etc., but they keep creeping in. And the second thing I would say is that, again, not being an ex-general, I wouldn't be as confident as some of my colleagues about the absolute military superiority of Israel in case you have a multi-front coalition facing us. I'll stop here.
Well, that's a provocative final sentence. It's going to have to be picked up in a future session because we've exhausted our time for today. I want to thank all of you, thank our viewers who have been with us for this memorial event marking the 15th anniversary of the passing of Zeev Schiff. I want to thank you, Amos Yadlin, Ephraim Sneh, Ehud Yaari, Amos Gilead. I want to wish all of you a happy new year where you are in Israel. And again, thank you to all of our guests. Thank you to all of our viewers. Again, Rob Satloff here in Washington at the Washington Institute. Bye-bye.